Awesome Sprinkles.
Hey YouTube, Awesome Writer here. In today's video, we're going to kind of be springboarding off of the recent news about Playmates being licensed to make a line of MMPR toys for Hasbro, talking about kind of the broader, is there too much MMPR conversation, as I brought up a lot of hot topics in my video yesterday about how they kind of have to do it because it's the most recognizable. And first of all, I want to apologize if I seemed extra toxic in that video or extra upset. I mean, it's not necessarily an excuse, but you have to understand after over a decade of dealing with so many negative comments, it just gets to you after a while. And fans certainly have valid complaints, but you see so many non-complaints and, you know, again, this isn't meant to be being attacking everybody, but in general, not just the Power Rangers Toku fandom, but all fandoms have gotten so toxic and antagonistic lately where we've created the fans versus the whatever company narrative that's just exhausting. And again, in a lot of these cases, there's legitimate complaints, but there's also a lot of entitlement. There's a lot of complaining about non-problems, and it just sucks that you can't even enjoy anything. Like, you get the toxic comments from this community, and then you can't even escape to like, oh, I want to watch a clip from my favorite Star Wars movie or my favorite comic book movie, and you search like, oh, Star Wars scene or Marvel scene or whatever, or like, you know, my favorite track from this movie, and the first results are Disney's trying to kill you and your children. It's like you can't escape it. So I just want to apologize. It's just, you get tired of it after a while. And I also feel that there is an element of some people in the fandom being unwilling to see things past their perspective. But let's talk about the too much MMPR thing, because obviously that's been a problem, you know, in terms of that's the only thing we really get when it comes to comics, when it comes to merchandise, whether it's something like this where it's a proper toy line or it's just the niche merchandise, which that kind of makes sense because you're probably not going to sell like Lost Galaxy keychains, but I'd like to get them. Regardless though, you know, I can see it from all the different angles, and it's interesting. The first thing I want to talk about is something that it's funny because I've kind of been on the opposite end of the argument for this in two different ways, which is, you know, yesterday I advocated for the fact that it's pretty much the only recognizable era, so it's the safest bet. Now, I'm not saying that there's not an opportunity maybe in the future to capitalize on a new era. As people have pointed out, Samurai is probably the biggest second possibility, as there's a big generation that grew up with that. That was probably one of the biggest booms in terms of publicity and return. So there is a possibility of capitalizing on that. I'm not sure if you could do that here with this line, or maybe you missed it, or how you would do that, but there is a possibility. I really don't believe that it would be that easy to make something like Time Force or Ninja Storm or something happen. I mean, you'll get occasional moments where it'll go viral-ish on Twitter, people remembering it, but I always kind of see those eras that are more popular as kind of like that kid show you watched and maybe a couple other dozen people watched, but just not quite the heights of popularity of MMPR or like Transformers or Turtles in their original incarnation. But my point is I think that there's maybe a time right now where something like Samurai could happen, maybe some sort of future iteration, if you push harder, could happen to make a different, more iconic era, but I don't think you're going to be able to go back and make like Lightspeed Rescue iconic all of a sudden unless something weird viral happens. The thing is that in general, outside of that possibility of Samurai, Power Rangers has failed to create multiple iconic eras, and I have brought that up before. I did a different video discussion somewhere years ago about that, and I said, you know, unlike Transformers or Turtles, which have multiple iconic eras like Beast Wars, or Animated or Prime, or, you know, 2003 Turtles, 2012 Turtles, even Rise of the TMNT has a pretty decent little cult following. And I brought up like they failed to create iconic eras like that. But then it's funny because back then I got kind of the opposite argument as I was getting the other day with my video, which was those are the same characters for the most part. Obviously Transformers has a bit of a rotating roster. Like, you do always have your staples though. I mean, you do have difference for Beast Wars, but they are basically variants. Like Optimus Primal is basically a variant of Optimus. I mean, no, he's not the same character, but you know what I mean. It's like the stand-in for it. But for the most part, you'll always get your Optimus, your Megatron, probably Bumblebee, stuff like that. You usually have some unique ones to the lineup. Turtles, obviously, it's mostly the same for Turtles, except for stuff like Venus. But it's same characters. So there is a bit of a difference there. As with Power Rangers, it's a little bit tougher because you're refreshing the costumes, the characters, everything. Whereas for the most part, in a lot of these different other franchises, you might get some new characters mixed in, but you always have your staples. So that was something that was brought up to me of like, that's why they were able to create iconic eras, is because you're still using the same familiarity. Now, like on the other side, people were talking about yesterday of like, well, other franchises have created multiple iconic eras, like Animated, like 2003 and stuff like that. It's true, but I think there is that difference there of the same characters rather than a complete refresh. And that got me thinking about like two different avenues for the future. I mean, right now, I think we're, in terms of the franchise, we're just in a really like bad place. Like Hasbro really just doesn't know what to do with it. They want to just find a way to make money, which is why this is happening. But talking about the future, again, I don't think it's impossible for Power Rangers to attempt to create a new iconic era or maybe capitalize on something like Samurai. I think they're going to miss their window, though, if we kind of stay in this little purgatory of MMPR merchandise and all that stuff. I was thinking, like, what if they just kind of went all in on it? Like, not that that's what I would want, but what if we just said, I know people wouldn't want this either, but my thing is, I would love to live in a world where you still get your MMPRs for the MMPR people, but we keep continuing to create new versions of characters and expand and all that stuff. I actually think, and I brought this up before, this, I guess, is a hot take, but I think Pokemon is the best at this. People constantly roll their eyes and complain when Charizard shows up again, but Power Rangers always has Gen 1 in your face, always giving stuff like Charizard and Pikachu new variants, but every generation they come out with almost 100 new monsters, and you always get at least a handful that become iconic to that generation. So they simultaneously push the nostalgia while pushing new stuff forward. Like every generation has at least a handful of Pokemon that become almost as iconic as the Gen 1s. I mean, I don't know if this is still true now, but for a while Greninja, Gen 6 Pokemon, was like the #1 Pokemon. So that's like a good example of ones that can do it right. But what I mean by going in for all in on MMPR is, what if we did turn it into something like TMNT or Transformers, or we continue to use the basis of MMPR in some format in terms of familiar characters like Jason, Zack, Trini, Billy, all that stuff, Zordon, Alpha, but just create like new versions, you know, kind of like a 2003 version series with new suits, maybe new iterations on the Zords, maybe adding in some new characters. What if you did like an animated series that had like Jason, Tommy, and Kimberly, and then 2 or 3 different new other characters, like Transformers will do it, where you'll have your Optimuses and your Bumblebees and your Ratchets, but then you'll have, you know, new characters and stuff like that. What if it just turned into something like that, where every few years we just got a new take on it, where we would get new suits and stuff like that? I know that's not what people would want, but maybe that's the best way to create something that sort of evolves, but capitalizes on your weakness effectively. Like, again, it's not what I would want, but you might be in that position. The thing is that it's tricky for PR to move out of public perception anyway. That's the thing too, is that I understand people's desire to want to see other seasons be successful or create new other seasons that are successful. Because again, I would love for the eventual reboot to be successful, whether it's this one or one in 10 years or whatever. But even setting aside like, oh, I want other seasons to be successful or MMPR to be successful, whatever season it is, it faces an uphill battle because Power Rangers has such a terrible reputation in terms of it. People just don't see the potential in it. So it's like, it's already got the deck stacked against it. Today, the question, is there too much MMPR? Yes, it's kind of like a necessary evil, unfortunately. You know, you can argue some oversaturation, but I think in terms of the general public, they probably don't think about it all that much because to them MMPR is the only thing, and they're not constantly following it. You know, obviously us fans are constantly following it, so every time they announce the 1200th MMPR thing, we're rolling our eyes. But for the general public, they just kind of see it as like, oh yeah, that's the PR merch on the shelf, or that's the PR thing that's happening, or if they ever do check anything out or make note of it, you know, it's not a huge deal to them because they're not constantly checking on it. I think obviously continually using it just continually digs yourself deeper into that hole, but it's like, can we really get out of that hole at this point? Or should they just accept that Power Rangers here might just be MMPR and just keep doing iterations like the Transformers and Turtles franchises do? You know, hopefully getting much more varied versions of it like that. I wouldn't be mad at that. My thing is again, ideally I would love to see a world where we could get new iterations and stuff like that, but I wouldn't be mad so long as the storytelling is good. I've said for years that for me, I've been enjoying the comics and I'd rather have the good comic storytelling for me than these, you know, weird Neo-Saban adaptions and stuff like that. But what do you guys think? You know, again, I'm sorry I seem so toxic in the other videos. I'm going to try to be better about it. It's just after years of dealing with it, you get so exhausted. And like I said, you can't even escape to other franchises because it seems like all fandoms are at war these days, needlessly. But let me know what you guys think. Would you be okay with something like that? I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't, but keeping an open mind with that idea, would there be potential avenues or ideas you would have for that? Do you think it's possible for Power Rangers to dig it out of the hole it's put itself in? Anyways, guys, I'm going to go watch the movie Holes with Shia LaBeouf. Just kidding. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.